Hi everyone, and welcome to the next segment of the Endgame series. This time we're going to look at the idea of the space advantage. In the endgame, as well as the middle game, space is very important. The principle of the space advantage should be seen in connection with the principle of the pawn structure and the one about two weaknesses. Space is gained with pawns, and a key feature of controlling space is that it's typically easier to shift pieces from one side of the board to the other, putting the defense under pressure through greater flexibility. Space makes it difficult for the defending side to coordinate his forces. A good example of these principles was given by Luc van Wely in a game against another Grandmaster, Vladimir Kopian, played at the 15th European Team Championships in 2005. Van Wely had white and open with d4, and I'm just going to speed through the first 20 moves or so to get to the position I want to talk about. It was a Nimzo-Indian defense that transposed to a hedgehog as follows. All our standard moves for this opening. And b6, and this is a normal pawn structure for the hedgehog, which is a brilliant and dynamic defense that I recommend learning. I've done a video about it. If you're interested, please check out the openings playlist and you should find it there fairly easily. Play here continued with f4, bishop b7, g4, bishop takes g2, queen takes g2, queen b7, and g5. And we've reached a fairly typical hedgehog position, except for the fact that black is lacking activity, which isn't usually the case, and white has gained good space on the king side, which he can often be provoked into doing, and in fact that's one of black's normal strategies in the opening. So here came queen takes g2 check, king takes g2, knight fd7 and h4, which is gaining further space. White has a decent edge now at about half a pawn. So rook e8 and rook fd1, which is immediately putting pressure on black's most obvious weakness, the backward d6 pawn. In itself, this isn't too serious for black, but his limited space makes it difficult for him to achieve a harmonious setup for his pieces. Furthermore, he must continually be on the lookout for plans like f5, h5, and then g6, or a4 and a5, creating a second target along the lines of the principle of two weaknesses. It's going to be harder for him to defend, especially with the space disadvantage. So rook c7, now rook d2, knight c6, and knight d e2, which is perhaps a surprising choice, but also an instructive one, as this is the usual strategy when playing with a space advantage. In such circumstances, you shouldn't allow your opponent to exchange any pieces, as it may relieve the pressure on his position. And at the moment, black's cramped pieces are stepping on each other's toes, and of course it's best for white to try and maintain that if he can. And here Kopian played f5, which is a difficult move to play, but more or less a necessary one, as black can't allow a white knight to come to e4, or the pressure on d6 will become too much, and black won't be able to avoid the loss of a pawn. But now white can open a second front according to the principle of two weaknesses, with e4. And after rook f8, which is a somewhat questionable move anyway, perhaps better was g6, but after h5 his position remains under significant pressure. So e takes f5 and rook takes f5. If instead e takes f5, then knight d5, and white has a big edge. However, this rook takes f5 allows knight e4, and now black is in fairly big positional trouble with d6 under fire. Playing d5 doesn't work as a defense after knight 4 g3, so instead Kopian played e5, which is effectively sacking a pawn. After knight takes d6, attacking the rook here on f5, pretty much forcing bishop takes d6. Now rook takes d6, and e takes f4, and now rook f1, and black has no further way to defend the pawn, so it's going to soon fall. And positionally white is much better here also, well over a pawn ahead according to Fritz, again thanks mostly to the space advantage and the freer game. And this b2 bishop is going to be a real menace. It's got this brilliant long diagonal to operate down. So knight e7, and now knight takes f4, threatening knight e6 with a very strong attack. So black's forced to move this rook, and he moved it to b7. Now came knight d5, which is finally allowing exchanges, as Van Wely had correctly calculated that the remaining black pieces wouldn't be able to generate activity. After knight takes d5, c takes d5, rook takes f1, king takes f1, a5, and black is in a completely passive position. He's got no prospects here. So h5, b5, and now king e2, which is bringing the king into the center. It's a good idea to get it done as soon as it's safe to in the endgame. And still black has no play, and as we saw in one of the previous endgame examples, the white pieces are dominating the black ones. White's winning here at close to 2 pawns ahead already in this position, and the passed d pawn will soon become a dangerous weapon. So king f8, and remarkably enough, Hakopian resigned 10 moves from now when faced with an even worse position. From here, Van Wely was able to bring his king right up the board and take total control of the play. Just to show how it went, it's as follows: king d3, king e7, rook a6, king f7, king c4, rook c7 check, rook c6, and black can't exchange rooks, or he'll have to sack his knight to stop the passed pawn from queening. So rook b7, now g6 check, h6 g6, h6 g6 check, king e8, and white is just gradually closing in on the black position. So now d6, king d8, and now the killer blow, rook a6, and white is now over 3 pawns ahead. The main threat is rook a8 check, which will win at least another pawn for white, after which it's more or less hopeless for black. And here Hakopian resigned. So it was a very smooth and nice win for Van Wely, who utilized the power of a space advantage expertly. The problem with being cramped is that your pieces cannot find good squares. It isn't the space advantage per se that kills you, but rather its side effects. In his early book, The Test of Time, Garry Kasparov provided an instructive analysis of our next example, where the exploitation of white's space advantage is the key theme. And this was a game he played with the white pieces against Eugenio Tor in Baku in 1980, and it's white to move here. So what would you play in this position? There's one move that gives white a big edge, whereas with every other move the position remains completely equal. Stop the video now if you'd like some more time to think about what it might be. h6, incredibly, is the move, and what's so impressive about it is that it's a counterintuitive one, as this is placing the pawn on the same color square as white's bishop, and it will have to be continuously guarded, the pawn here, by the g4 knight, which therefore loses its flexibility. So why play it then, you might ask? The point is that it exploits white's space advantage in very instructive style. Black's minor pieces have no decent squares, and they're being dominated by the white pieces. What's more, the g5 bishop is now going to be in trouble once white gets a knight to e4, and due to black's cramped pieces, there's very little he can do about that. Tor tried rook e7, now came rook fe2, which is making space for the knight to get to e4 via f2. Now king f7, and black has no constructive plan here anyway. Tor was probably playing for a draw. He's trying to keep everything closed and solid, but it's very difficult against Kasparov. So knight df2, and now bishop c1, which is trying to escape to the h file after knight e4. And this is an ideal square for the knight in this position, as it's pressurizing the backward pawns on f6 and d6, and essentially is forcing the passive knight on e8 to stay at its passive post. So it's a very nice play, positionally speaking. And now rook e d7, king f3, and king e7, which wasn't a great choice as it allowed Kasparov to play exactly how he liked to, with a very precisely calculated series of moves. Okay, that's the end of part 1.